SallyAnn Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today. And this is really just about kind of hearing a bit about your story to hopefully inspire others about moving into a chief exec role or into that leadership space in the third sector. And I guess the first question that people will want me to ask you is, what's life like after Aberlour? I know it's not been that long, but how are you finding it?
Yeah, I mean, I finished working with Aberlour at the end of November of last year, so pretty much 2 months in.
Yeah.
Interesting is a word I've used fairly frequently. I'm probably, yeah, I mean, so obviously when I stepped down from Aberlour, I was entering a phase that I was referring to as semi-retirement.
Yeah.
So what I've found out in the last 2 months is I'm not very good at semi-retirement, and I've worked pretty much full-time since I left, supporting different organisations with improvement, doing some child protection training. So it's been an interesting journey, because part of what I've had to do is psychologically disconnect from an organisation that I love dearly, and that I committed 11 and a half years of my life to in my professional life. So I've been very deliberately trying to step back and step into something new. And it's been great actually, but it's not really gone to plan. I've been much busier than I thought I might be. And I'm asked almost on a daily basis by my husband if I'm going back to work full time. That's just the plan, but it isn't the plan.
No, and I think that obviously says a lot to people wanting to work with you and that as well, which must be quite nice.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things that's happened is the people that I've worked with have featured in my career journey at different points, and that's really fantastic, because I've reconnected with people that I really enjoyed working with in the recent past, and actually the quite distant past. So that's been really good. And the difference, I suppose, is we're reconnecting to do something that we want to do. So that's been a really good experience as well. So albeit I've been busy doing things I've chosen to do. But I have discovered, and people that know me probably knew this better than I knew it myself, that I actually find it quite hard to say no. So I'm going to learn that discipline over the next 6 to 8 weeks. I'm going to perfect it.
Well done. If you let me know how that goes, that would be great. I think though it's a really good point about people you've worked with through your career, and how that kind of, there's people, it's life, isn't it? You gravitate towards, and you've got similar ideas and values and stuff you want to get involved in, and how that kind of can really impact someone's journey, particularly in this sector where, there's lots of really amazing things to fight for, and really good things to show up for every day and work. And I guess you don't just leave that, do you, or lose it when you move from one thing to another?
No, and I think what actually connects us is that shared value base, a shared sense of purpose in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So you do circle back to the people that you have trusted the most, that you've enjoyed working with the most, and that will push the envelope a wee bit in terms of being challenging, because the kind of work that I've chosen to step into following stepping down from Aberlour has really been around how we get alongside people and help them improve their organisations, and help them really look at what excellence within their organisations can look like. But we take a very rights-focused approach, so it's really about centering that around the rights of children, the rights of families. And that can be quite a challenge within organisations if you're stepping into a culture that doesn't actually support that approach. So the people that I'm choosing to work with at the moment are very much kind of fellow travellers, shall we say.
That's really good, and it's great for you to be in that space, but you probably want to take some time for yourself as well, do a mix of it. But I think people who've come from those big substantive chief exec roles, like the one you would have had at Aberlour, it's that kind of changing your mindset from being full pelt all the time, and you never know what's going to happen the next minute, never mind the next week, to being a bit more kind of structured, and actually saying no to something is okay, if it's not something that necessarily fits at the time. But I think it's just a new way of working for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose, so people make assumptions that in a chief exec role is full pelt and full on all of the time, and I suppose part of what I try to achieve in the workplace is to get a good balance between emergency crisis responses, which have to be addressed, but also doing planned work. And I suppose what I think happened when I went to Aberlour was there was lots to do in the early days. It was an organisation that was ready for improvement. There was a real hunger for improvement in the organisation, and there was a fairly big agenda in relation to how that was taken forward and how we manage practice improvement as well as cultural shifts and organisational change, really, in its truest sense. So it was full on for a long time.
Yeah.
But actually, I suppose I got to the point kind of 8, 9, 10 years in where we had done lots of change, and change is cyclical, as you know. So we were kind of entering that stage of reviewing where we'd got to, looking at how we actually put more change in place. How do we actually become innovative for the families who need it? Because what we also saw was outside of our organisation, societally, real challenges that had worsened really for a lot of the people that we were working with and who we seek to serve. So we needed to become more innovative. So part of that demands intention, it demands purpose, but you can't run at it. You've got to be quite thoughtful about how you take that change forward. So I never at any point following my first few years within the organisation felt overwhelmed or overburdened, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I did and I do well is choose people that are really talented to be around me to take forward some of the really important organisational tasks that need done. And I think as a leader, that's one of the things that people should think really, really carefully about, is the how they, as a leader, can use their own humility to spot talent, and the people in the organisation or who might come to the organisation that fundamentally are better at some of the things that are required than the chief executive is. And I think I'm quite good at that. So I had a great team around me in Aberlour, which meant that some of that innovation that I talked about, some of that new thinking, it was just a pleasurable experience to get people around the table and think about, along with families, about, okay, where can we take this? How can we push the envelope? How can we actually challenge Scotland to be better at supporting the people that we are here to serve?
That's the whole purpose of you in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why that organisation's set up. And I think as well, having that kind of skill as a leader about thinking actually you can't do it all by yourself, can you? I mean, how could one person do all of that? And I think that's something that when we're speaking to people who want to step into that first role, quite often they'll have the conversation of, well, there's 10 things on that job spec, but actually I can't do 3 of them, or I've never done that before. And you're like, well, you've got the senior management team, you don't have to do it all on your own. And I guess what was your kind of, going back a little, that kind of journey of stepping into that first chief exec position?
So as I said, I stepped into an organisation that I had known from a distance because I'd worked with Aberlour since I qualified as a social worker actually in 1990 in some of their community-based services, but I hadn't worked within it. So it was a limited knowledge that I had of the organisation. But I knew enough because when I was coming in from Bernardo's, where I was at that point, you notice what else is happening within the third sector as senior leaders. So I knew that it was an organisation that was experiencing some difficulties. So part of what I was quite thoughtful about, and this goes back to my social work training actually, as a social worker, part of what I was taught was about understanding systems, whether that system is a family or a small team or a big organisation. Understand how the system is responding to what's happening within that system. So part of what I wanted to do and what I said to the board I would do is actually take some time to just really listen deeply to what people were telling me about the things that were really working well within the organisation and the things that people thought they could do differently and better. Because when I went in, we didn't have a strategy, and part of one of my tasks was to bring together a strategy for the organisation. And I said, well, actually, bringing together strategy is not something that happens in an office. It's a bottom-up and top-down approach that we need. So I spent probably the first 6 months when I was within Aberlour just taking time to go and visit people, speaking to them, either on a planned or unplanned basis about what mattered most to them. And again, it's going back to that whole bit about your purpose. So my purpose was about going into an organisation, supporting them to improve, yes, but with the objective of supporting the children and families we seek to serve. So if I kept my mind and eye on that purpose of supporting children and families who found it difficult to find a voice, and listen really carefully to what people in the organisation were telling me about how they best did that and where the gaps were. That for me was a really powerful process in terms of establishing me as a leader within the organisation, but also being really clear within the organisation that as a leader I don't have all the answers, but what I'm good is distilling information that comes to me from whatever source to make, to use that sensibly and strategically to try and drive positive change. So that's what I try to do, and I think we did a really good job actually of doing that.
I think you did, and when you leave something like that, you know you've done a good job yourself, and you can feel actually you're leaving it in a great place, and it's I guess looking to the next chapter of that organisation as well as your next chapter. And if you go back maybe a little bit further before Aberlour, did you always have in your mind that you wanted to be? Was it a pathway for you, a conscious thing to becoming a chief exec, or was it just actually it kind of all fell into play?
So I was thinking about this before I came in to talk to you, and I was thinking, did you actually have a plan? And no, I didn't, because I suppose my background, I grew up in West Lothian in a village, a very small mining village, but I was really fortunate in the sense that I had a really supportive family, a mum and dad that were really very focused on their own work, and they were both in the charity and public sectors, private sectors, they went in various different roles, but they had really strong values around social justice and fairness, I suppose. I was one of 6 children, so we were never greatly well off or anything like that, but I grew up in a family where political debate was commonplace, shall we say. In fact, my mother moved to Scotland from Sunderland when she was a wee girl because my grandfather worked for the trade union movement on a full-time basis. So that was my background. So I suppose from a very early age that I suppose encouraged in me a kind of thoughtful approach to what I was seeing, because I grew up in the 1970s and 1980s and into the 90s, went to university in 1983 at the height of the Thatcher government. So there was quite a lot of activism going on at the time, and I suppose I studied politics and economic history. I had a real interest in social issues from when I was a teenager actually. So I suppose it was a natural process for me to think about, once I'd got my degree, what do you want to do with that degree? And loved Glasgow University, and I thought, well, one route back to Glasgow University is to go and do social work.
Stay longer.
Yes. So I went back and did my social work qualification as well. But I was really clear actually about my entry into social work. I was motivated and remain motivated by trying to achieve better social justice for the poorest people in society. It's been a lifelong frustration of mine that I know children who were born into poor circumstances that were very talented and were not able to achieve their full potential. I have experienced and met and loved those children all the way through my personal, professional career, if you like. And I remain frustrated but motivated to try and change things for the better for those kids. So did I ever think I would be a chief executive? I never gave it a second thought when I was going into social work, because I was going to change the world. I was actually going to be, there was going to be some kind of mini revolution of care. That never happened either, but I was motivated by quite political things with a small p, but a real sense of social justice in the widest sense of the word.
Yeah. And if you were, obviously the third sector is in a different place just now than it would have been when you started your career, certainly, and probably most of the way through it. And what kind of advice, if any, or points to look out for, or anything like that, would you give to people now who are maybe starting their career in the third sector, or at that point thinking, what do I do? Do I try and advance? Do I move out? What's that kind of, any thoughts around that?
So I suppose my advice would be to stay true to what you are, what you believe in, who you are. I mean, when I came into the third sector, it was a very deliberate choice that I made, because I had been in the local government sector for about 18 years and working at different levels, including senior management levels. And I suppose my experience in the public sector at that point was becoming increasingly challenged from a values perspective, because I felt as if I couldn't actually be engaged in positive change that I wanted to make in terms of the career that I had chosen. So I had to make a really, what was a really difficult decision actually, about whether I stayed within the public sector and I have a lot of respect and regard for local government in particular. But whether I stayed there and tried to work within what I saw and emerging as a fairly difficult culture, or whether I chose to remind myself of why I went into social work in the first place and look to see where I could make the most positive impact, I suppose. And I chose to move away. Now, the reason that was difficult was because I, at my heart, I am somebody who believes in local government and the power of local government to make really positive change for people. And also from a selfish point of view, you become involved as a member of the workforce, and you're committed to, members of public service pension schemes, etc. Yeah. So you experience detriment financially when you move away from that public sector in the main. And I, at the time, had two small children. I was the main wage earner, so there was lots of consideration. So it was a big decision, but actually it was the right decision at the time for me and for my girls, actually, and my husband, because I've never really looked back, because the type of stress and the type of challenge that I have experienced both within Barnardo's and Aberlour is a very different and type of stress and challenge, and it's never felt overwhelming, and it's never felt disconnected from where I am as a person. Lots of external influences have in terms of where some of the government decision making goes. That has certainly felt quite difficult to navigate at times. But actually, moving into the sector I did from a values perspective and from an impact perspective, where can I make the biggest difference? Yeah. And I've not looked back. I didn't move into the sector with the ambition of becoming a chief executive, because I've never had that plan. So I think what I was faced with was a range of fortunate opportunities that I was able to take because of my background and because I was in the right place at the right time.
You're the right person to do it, which is the other thing. And I think, hopefully. The third sector, the reason I love working in the third sector is just the values, and you want to be, I know I'm not employed by the third sector, but I don't think you have to be to make a change and to support the work that goes on there. And I think another way of doing that is through being involved in boards as trustees.
Yes.
I know you've been involved in many things, and I think this is something that I bring up in every one of these kind of interviews, because I think that actually it's probably one of the most kind of significant things you can do in your career, whether you're in this space or not, and just the amount of impact that can make in terms of organisations. I don't know if there's anything about that in terms of people's leadership journeys you think would be important.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would say is if people are keen to step into chief executive positions, then one of the things that people really need to understand at a fairly deep level is the whole governance of organisations and how that's done well. And there's lots of examples where that works really, really well within the third sector and across different sectors, but there are also many examples where it's gone awry, frankly. So one of the things I would say is that I have been active on boards all of my time as a chief executive. I have also been on boards, whether it's membership organisation boards or the boards of other smaller third sector organisations. I have been requested to come in when organisations have been in crisis from a governance perspective and come in to participate in boards. And I think there's really rich learning in there in terms of governance, but also just the kind of whole organisational culture and the importance of accountability structures, etc., within organisations. And even now, when I left Aberlour, I had to stand down from a couple of boards because they were very much related to my role. But I wanted to maintain contact with local charities, actually. So part of what I decided was when I finished at Aberlour that if I did go onto a board, it would be something that meant more to me personally, I suppose. So I'm now, and have been for about a year and a half, a trustee of Ayrshire Cancer Support Group, which is a personal choice because I've lost a couple of very close pals to cancer. But also my own mum was involved in being one of the first employees of Ayrshire Cancer Support Group. So it felt like a nice circle closing again.
Closing that off, isn't it? That's really good. I think that's really important for being involved as a trustee. You're giving up your time. Sometimes you're kind of thinking, why am I going to this meeting at 6 o'clock on a rainy Tuesday night? in the centre of Glasgow or whatever, and it's because you really love it and you want to do it. So I think that's really important, and that's really good to hear. I guess just to close us off, is there any advice you'd give someone who's in the sector who's thinking, I'm really ready to move, I'm not sure what to do, or any kind of do's or don'ts?
So I would give some really clear advice, especially to women in the sector. When you read those job descriptions, don't feel bad if you think you can only tick half of the boxes, because I think certainly speaking to friends and colleagues, women are more likely to count themselves out of jobs when they do that initial sifting of, here are the skills I do or don't have. So speak to somebody, think again about what those essential characteristics are saying, and think again about whether in fact you do meet that criteria. But I think the other thing for me is to make sure, if you are stepping into something new, you're going there for all the right reasons and you're leaving for the right reasons, because I think endings are really important. And one of the things that I did when I was leaving Aberlour, and I made it clear to the board, was, in terms of honouring the role that I had played in the organisation for so long, but also honouring the person that was going to come in to replace me, we needed to be really intentional about how I left and how they came to the organisation. So I think even at the point of application to a new organisation, people need to be clear about the whys, what their purpose is, and how they're going to exit their current organisation and how they want to map their entry into the next organisation.
Yeah, great. SallyAnn, thanks so much for your time. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.